Government of Andhra Pradesh established a new district on the name of Rangareddy, which was my negative district in United Andhra Pradesh. Late Justice Konda Madhava Reddy garu was a stalwart in the field of judiciary. Besides, he was a great scholar. Justice Konda Madhava Reddy garu played a key role in the judiciary and as a board member of various educational institutions. He brought reforms in the field of the education. As a censor of the grandfather Sri Konda Vishweshwar Reddy garu is serving as a member of the parliament at the same time on the name of his father Justice Konda Madhava Reddy. A trust was formed. The trust is forming various social services such as free medical camps and improving the condition of the sanitation in 247 government schools in the Eastwhile Rangareddy district. The Konda Madhava Reddy Trust is also working towards the enhancement of the skills and the youth employment generation. Previously, former Chief Justice of India Hansraj Khanna, former Prime Minister of India P.V. Narasimha Rao garu, Father of the Nation, India Green Revolution M.S. Swaminathan, and number of stalwarts in their representative fields have attended to deliver the Justice Konda Madhava Reddy Memorial Lecture. Dr. Narendra Jadhav is a multi-talented and more respected person. Today's lecture on 55 years of the Constitution making and the role of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar will be help the youth understanding the situation of before the independence. Once again, thank you to all.
Thank you, sir. Now I'll invite myself to deliver the presidential address.
Thank you, Dr. Lakshman Garu and Shri Gaddam Prasad Garu, for sharing your valuable thoughts and kicking off the spirit of this memorial lecture and keeping the memory alive for Justice Konda Madhava Reddy. It's much appreciated. Thank you. It is now our pleasure, sir, to request Justice B. Sudarshan Reddy Garu to deliver the presidential address and introduce the chief of guest of the event.
Distinguished chief guest of the day, Sri Professor Narendra Jadhav ji, and Speaker of Telangana Legislative Assembly, Sri Gaddam Prasad Garu, Dr. K. Lakshman, a distinguished parliamentarian in his own right, and Sri Vishweshwar Reddy Konda, the managing trustee of the foundation. I find a galaxy of distinguished guests in the audience. A former Chief Justice of Karnataka High Court, Justice Bhaskar Rao, and a sitting judge of Patna High Court, and perhaps now the president of the AV Education Society, Justice Abhishek Reddy, Justice Gopal Reddy, Justice Rajshekar Reddy, Justice Jaiswal, Justice Chandraya, Justice Krishnammohan Reddy, Justice Sheshan Reddy, Madam Vasundhara Jadhav ji, Sri Padmanabhaya, former Home Secretary and a distinguished civil servant. Two distinguished legislators sitting here, my good friends, Vivek and Rajgopal Reddy. Professor Kodanram, I find Marisha Shishir Reddy in the audience, and all friends, ladies and gentlemen. I thought I have forgotten Sangeeta Reddy's name. Sangeeta Reddy, Joint Director, Apollo Group of Hospitals. Indeed, it's a great honor. Let me at the very outset state unequivocally that it's a great honor to be presiding on the occasion of Justice Konda Madhava Reddy Memorial Lecture, being delivered by Professor Narendra Jadhav, an eminent economist, an erudite scholar, and a quintessential Ambedkarite. Justice Madhava Reddy was my mentor, guide, philosopher, and a beacon of light. In my professional career as well as in my personal life, he was the one who counseled me at every stage of my career, including but not limited to the times when I was in two minds about accepting the position of a Justice of the High Court. His immense wisdom, imparted in the gentlest of words and the softest of timbre of voice, were unparalleled in my life. Madhavana, as we members of his extended family, friends, and of course, a huge group of youngsters who looked up to him and admired him, affectionately called him, came from a family that viewed all youngsters, irrespective of their socio-economic background, as their own wards. Now, I'll stop the autobiographical note and say a few words on this occasion. And he carried on that tradition, making us a part of his family. I must add a note here regarding his immediate family as well as his extended family. They imbibed his graciousness and instinctual emotional connect, making us all a part of the family. I have often stated it privately and also publicly. Madhavanna's family was a soul family. For those inspired by him, they have enriched our lives immensely, and I must place my utmost gratitude to all of them, while hastening to add that I do not have the wherewithal to be able to repay. This memorial lecture is being organized on the occasion of the 75th year of the ratification of the Constitution of India. 50th perhaps is a mistake. And I wanted to recall a central aspect of Justice Madhava Reddy's view of his fellow human beings and cite it as an example of the central core of the spirit, the soul of our Constitution. Justice Madhava Reddy was instinctually an empathetic person, and that meant that he recognized the inherent and indefeasible dignity of every human being he came in touch with. He treated everyone who came to his house or office equally and with the same courtesy and affection, whether a person be a constitutional functionary or a poor peasant whose gnarled fingers coax the food we eat out our Mother India. In the various debates that informed the making of our Constitution, one of the questions often asked was whether India would truly run itself as a social democracy. To this, Baba Saheb recalled that India's ancient philosophers had deduced the foundational ontological mantra that could be the true building block of a genuine social democracy, and cited two Mahakavyas from Mandokopanishad, Aham Brahmasmi and Tatvamasi. Baba Saheb conceived the Mahakavyas as a recognition of essential and inherent human dignity in ourselves as well as in everyone else. He pointed out that by the elite of India claiming the first one but forgetting the second, weakened India and wrecked its civilization. The Constitution of India was conceived as a framework for both governance and social relations, marked by solicitousness of the essential dignity of every other Indian. The directive principles of state policy, read along with the fundamental rights, encoded the foregoing and made it foundational to governance. Welfare of fellow citizens was no longer to be dependent on the caprice and whim of the well-off and the powerful, but the hitherto disempowered and the disenfranchised were to be constitutional claimants by virtue of their essential and inherent human dignity. We were fortunate as a nation that our founders sought to abide by that dictum. And we were fortunate that we had people like Justice Madhava Reddy who embodied those principles in their lives and approach to governance and justice, and further nurtured our constitutional endeavors. I cannot but help contrast the attitude of our founding fathers and great men like Justice Madhava Reddy with the shocking things being said even by constitutional functionaries. It was deeply distressing to read some newspaper articles recently in which it was reported that even some learned Supreme Court judges have likened welfare recipients to being quote-unquote parasites. I am not on the point of whether every welfare scheme is appropriate or necessary, nor am I even on the point of whether the Supreme Court can even be an arbiter in such policy matters. But to call welfare schemes freebies, suggesting that the recipients are undeserving of the solicitude of our policymakers and the recipients of welfare or parasites is to be completely dehumanize our fellow citizens. I can only hope that the newspaper reports were inaccurate or that the learned judges were extremely tired and spoke out without the necessary restraint. However, to hear the language being used by dictatorial oligarchs in other parts of the world to dismantle the social safety nets for those being left behind in the neoliberal economy from our constitutional functionaries is something to be extremely concerned about. I am tempted to recall Fallinariman once said, I quote, amidst the tensions between antagonistic principles, one thing is certain. So long as poverty, dirt, continues to stalk the land, and so long as gross disparities between the very rich and the very poor get accentuated as they have in recent years, the ideal of an egalitarian society envisaged in our basic document of governance remains an evanescent dream. Whatever the nation's karma, our founding fathers cannot be faulted for a lack of idealism, nor can providence. It is not in our stars, but in ourselves that we are thus. Unquote. It is not because of our constitution, but despite its provisions, that as a nation we have failed to fulfill what were naively assumed to be achievable goals. We, the people of India, boldly abolished untouchability in our constitution, but after more than 75 years of its working, we have not been able to eliminate it from our hearts. Dr. Radhakrishnan warned that when power outstrips ability, will fail on evil days. Ladies and gentlemen, indeed, power has overtaken ability. We have fallen on evil days. Baba Saheb in his speech, warning us of the dangers of allowing graded social and economic inequalities to persist, hinted that the very temples of democracy could totter if his warning is not heeded. And we see oligarchs and those who would espouse the ideologies of Herbert Spencer and Ayn Rand began to question whether democracy itself is a good anymore. To impart that, is a good anymore? To impart the discussion and conclusions into India would be to destroy the better foundations of our civilizational ethos and our constitutional promise. We are fortunate to have Sri Professor Narendra Jadavji, a prolific writer in English and Marathi, one of our outstanding economists and a former Vice Chancellor, public policy expert, who has agreed to deliver this memorial lecture. At a time when we can only seem to either defy historical figures blindly or vilify them with nary a thought for the fact that they have also been susceptible to occasional human foibles. Professor Jadhav ji stands out for having excavated through painstaking historical research the development of one of our greater sons of India and how he crucially contributed to the shaping of the Constitution of India. This is reflected in his seminal works. Ambedkar, Awakening India's Social Consciousness. This book is the first ever intellectual biography of Dr. Ambedkar. Another one, which is equally important, is Ambedkar, an economist extraordinary. Many people do not know about that aspect of the matter. I do not wish to stand between this audience and a remarkable scholar. I know all of you are eagerly awaiting to hear him, but I just wanted to end with a suggestion to the family of Justice Madhava Reddy that whatever papers of Justice Madhava Reddy that are still available should be digitalized and made available for scholars and students to benefit from his thoughts. It would be a way of making the remarkable jurist and a man to continue to speak from the beyond and impart his words of wisdom. You must have noticed I have not used the expression late Sri Madhava Reddy because these people are never late. They live in us, they live with us, they guide us forever. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your forbearance. Jai Hind. Now may I request the chief guest of the day, Sri Professor Jadhav ji, to deliver the memorial lecture. Sir, all is yours.
The chair of this function, Justice Sudarshan Reddy Garu, Honorable Speaker, Shri Gaddam Prasad Garu, Dr. K. Lakshmanan, MP Rajya Sabha, and Vishweshwar Reddy Garu, Member of Parliament, Lok Sabha, and my dear friend. Honorable invitees, distinguished family members of Justice Konda Madhava Reddy, office bearers of JKMR Foundation, ladies and gentlemen. I am greatly honored to have been invited to deliver this year's Justice Konda Madhava Reddy Memorial Lecture. Indeed, I am overwhelmed that the organizers have considered me worthy to be in the league of highly distinguished previous speakers in this series, such as former Prime Minister Sri P.V. Narasimha Rao, Arun Jaitley, Dr. M.S. Swaminathan, and my former bosses, Governors of Reserve Bank of India, Dr. C. Rangarajan, Dr. Y.V. Reddy, among others. I owe this great privilege to Sri Konda Vishweshwar Reddy himself a distinguished personality, an engineer, an entrepreneur, a social activist, MP, Member of Parliament par excellence, and of course, my very dear friend. Let me take this opportunity to pay my humble tribute to the great personality, Justice Shri Konda Madhava Reddy. Before proceeding further, I wish to commend Justice Konda Madhava Reddy Foundation. This foundation, JKMR Foundation, has been established in the memory of Justice Konda Madhava Reddy. This foundation has, over the years, taken so many socially desirable initiatives focused on education, skill development, employment for rural youth, and so on. I am particularly excited to note that the eligibility of candidates is 10th fail or 12th grade fail. In other words, this foundation embraces those youth who are not eligible for most openings and makes them self-reliant. This all-inclusive legacy, no doubt, flows from the traditions that were laid down by Justice Konda Madhava Reddy and his great father, Konda Venkataswamy Reddy, a veteran freedom fighter and former Deputy Chief Minister of Andhra Pradesh. Well, friends, as you are well aware, Justice Konda Madhava Reddy was a multifaceted personality. His highly distinguished career included landmark achievements such as the Chief Justice of Andhra Pradesh High Court, as well as the Chief Justice of Bombay High Court, and founder chairman of the Central Administrative Tribunal, CAT, and acting governor of Maharashtra, my own state. Besides being an eminent jurist, JKMR was involved in many social, cultural, and educational institutions, especially those devoted to the cause of deprived classes. All said and done, what was closest to his heart, however, was law and constitution. And that is precisely why I have chosen to share some thoughts on this theme of 55 years of constitution making, the role of Dr. Baba Saheb Ambedkar. Most people are somewhat baffled, and here it was mentioned by Mr. Lakshman Garu that why am I talking about 55 years of constitution making? I don't blame people who get baffled by the title 55 years of constitution making. Most people believe that the Indian Constitution was written during the period 1946 to 1950. That was the period when Samvidhan Sabha, the Constituent Assembly, was working to create the Constitution of India. However, this statement is only half truth. In reality, the Indian Constitution was an outcome of a 55-year-long process of constitutional reforms starting way back in 1895. That is why 55. Do you know? There were two parallel tracks. The process began in 1895, and I'm going to talk about this entire process. As a matter of fact, there were two parallel tracks of constitutional reforms, one from the British rulers and the second one from Indian leaders. And these two parallel tracks finally merged together in 1946 when the Constituent Assembly was formed, and that led finally to India becoming a democratic republic in January 1950. Now, let us look at this, in this JKMR Memorial Lecture, I would like to offer a historical perspective on the evolution of Indian Constitution. I assure you that this journey is quite exciting. It has many ups and downs and interspersed with a lot of surprises that I hope you will find fascinating. In all, there were as many as 12 major attempts at making Indian Constitution. And guess who was one leader? Who was common to most, if not all, of these 12 efforts? Not Mahatma Gandhi, not Jawaharlal Nehru, not Sardar Patel. It was indomitable Dr. Baba Saheb Ambedkar who was the common factor in most of these efforts at making the Indian Constitution. That is why I have titled my address today as 55 years of constitution making in India, the role of Dr. Baba Saheb Ambedkar. So, ladies and gentlemen, let the journey begin. The first attempt at constitution making, you will be surprised, was inspired by Lokmanya Tilak. The year was 1895 and there was a Swaraj Bill of 1895, and this was promoted by Miss Annie Besant, and it was considered the first articulation of constitutional imagination of Indian people. This constitution laid down number of things, including citizens' rights, freedom of expression, right to property. Curiously, this draft constitution also included provision for right to bear arms, which was, of course, unlikely to be accepted. This constitution was remarkable in the sense that it had a provision of compulsory primary education way back in 1895. This was the first attempt which did not go anywhere. The second attempt, very significant attempt, it came from in the form of Government of India Act of 1919. First was the Indian effort, now the first major effort by the British rulers. That happened with the Government of India Act of 1919. This pivotal legislation was a turning point This pivotal legislation, Government of India Act of 1919, was a turning point in the process of continuous reforms, and it came about from what is called Chelmsford and Montague reforms. Now this one, the British government made a historic announcement in 2017 that they were beginning the era of progressive realization of responsible government of a limited character in India. And this historic announcement was made. That was the first partial freedom was given to Indians. And that happened in 2017. Now, see the destiny. As the luck would have it, after this announcement was made, there was a Southborough committee was sent to formulate what we call delimitation exercise now, but to talk about the franchise. It was the franchise committee led by Lord. Now this particular provision, it happened at a very interesting time. Dr. Ambedkar was a student studying in London at that time, and because he was denied extension of scholarship, he was compelled to come back to India. And 1 week after the announcement for partial autonomy was made, Dr. Ambedkar arrived in India. Look at the destiny. And when the Southborough Committee came, Dr. Ambedkar, as a 26-year-old young man, made a presentation before the Southborough's Committee. And what did he argue? Southborough's Committee, he argued before the Southborough's Committee that the franchise should be made as broad as possible. Earlier, it was very narrow, it was confined to only 3% people. Dr. Ambedkar was the one who said that the franchise should be made as broad as possible. He was little short of saying that there should be adult franchise, universal adult franchise. Look at this. At that time in 1919, even United States did not have universal adult franchise. Women did not have right to vote in America in 1919. That happened in the year following, 1920. And here was this young man, 26 years old, who made a presentation before a foreign government that there should be almost an adult, universal adult franchise. That was the first spark that he showed as far as the constitution making is concerned. So Dr. Ambedkar's testimony before the Southborough's Committee was truly phenomenal, and it will go down in the history as a remarkable testimony by a very young scholar who, for a historical reason, because administratively he could not continue his higher education. That's why he came back and made a presentation, and then after a few years, 2-3 years, he went back and completed his education. That was the second attempt. The third attempt at constitution making in India also took place came from Indians. That's called the Commonwealth of India Bill of 1925. This was promoted by Miss Annie Besant, and this was a full-fledged constitution prepared for the first time, and it had 127 articles. It was a fairly big one, including fundamental rights. It had all these provisions. It was supposed to be presented. It was presented in the British Parliament by a leader of Labour Party in December 1925, but as the luck would have it, there was a change of government, the Labour Party was thrown out of power, and Tories came to power, and in that process, this bill was never discussed. So that was the third attempt at constitution making. Now we turn to the fourth attempt at constitution making. The fourth attempt at constitution making came with the appointment of Simon Commission. As you are aware, Labour Party in UK, they appointed in 1927, they appointed a 7-member commission called the Indian Statutory Commission. This was led by Mr. Simon, Lord Simon, and therefore it's called Simon Commission. Simon Commission was resented by everybody in India because the commission came to decide the destiny of our country, but it did not have a single Indian member. So there was a lot of reaction everywhere. Simon, go back, were the slogans given, and he was hooted out wherever he went. He had meetings with number of people, but it did not lead to anything. And in fact, there were hartals, there were morchas, there was a widespread discontent because Simon Commission did not have support of Indian people, because there was not a single Indian present in the Simon Commission. In fact, during one of those hartals, a lathi charge was made, and one of the great Indian leaders died in that. Bal, Pal, and the three great leaders at that time. One of them died in the process. Lala Lajpat Rai. Lala Lajpat Rai died in that lathi charge while opposing the Simon Commission. Now, Dr. Ambedkar refused not to participate. He decided to participate. He gave a statement and testimony before the Simon Commission. And that Simon Commission testimony was very important. When the British government saw that Indians are not enthusiastic about it, they appointed a subcommittee to go to various states and talk to the leaders. At that time, Dr. Ambedkar was just nominated to the Bombay Province Assembly, Vidhan Parishad. So he was part of the assembly at that time, nominated member, and he chose to present before even the committee which was sent, subcommittee which was sent to the state, and he gave a testimony before that too. That while the Simon Commission report came out, Dr. Ambedkar was not happy with the report at all. He submitted his own big report for Simon Commission, but Simon Commission's report as a whole did not cut any ice because there was no support from Indian people at large. So therefore, that could not happen. And therefore, that could not happen. When that did not happen, the next thing to happen was the British said that if you don't want our report, if you don't accept Simon Commission report, why don't you, they challenged the Indians, why don't you create a constitutional draft of yourself? And that challenge was accepted by the then Congress party. And then the committee was appointed under the chairmanship of Motilal Nehru. That was the fifth attempt. Motilal Nehru Committee, and that was a very interesting committee. That committee had many great leaders, including, Motilal Nehru was the chair, but Subhash Chandra Bose was the member of that committee. And who was the secretary of that committee? The young, dynamic Jawaharlal Nehru was the secretary of that committee. The Motilal Nehru Committee report came out in 1928, and it recommended a dominion status of complete internal self-government. It also recommended a federal setup for government. It recommended elections under universal suffrage and a Bill of Rights called Fundamental Rights. So all that. They also recommended for the first time, detailed fundamental rights, including giving equal rights to women. This was really a landmark development. However, Dr. Ambedkar was not in favor of Motilal Nehru Committee report. What he said was that this committee report may appear to be good because it has all these fundamental rights listed. But what is the guarantee that these fundamental rights would be implemented? There is no assurance of implementation of these fundamental rights. And many years later, and there are so many judicial experts and judges sitting here, you'll recall, sir, that there is this Article 32 in Indian Constitution which gives ordinary citizens access directly to the Supreme Court if there is a violation of fundamental rights. So Dr. Ambedkar introduced that many years later as Article 32 and called that article as the heart and soul of Indian Constitution. Just announcement of fundamental rights by itself is nothing unless an ordinary citizen has access directly to the Supreme Court in case of violation of their fundamental rights. So Dr. Ambedkar criticized Motilal Nehru Committee report because it did not have that kind of access. That brings us to, even within the Congress party, Motilal Nehru Committee report was challenged. Why was it challenged? Because it talked about dominion status. Whereas the dominant thinking in Congress party at that time was Purna Swaraj, complete independence. And Motilal Nehru Committee was talking about dominating this this status, dominion status, that is internal freedom within the British Empire, that was not acceptable to young and dynamic people in the Congress. And the brigade was led by none other than Jawaharlal Nehru against his own father's report, Motilal Nehru Committee report. This was at the time, that this is what that happened at the time. Now, Motilal Nehru Committee, regrettably, again, did not make any political difference, any big difference. And British realized that this is not good enough, and what we should do is to have a direct discussion with the Indian leaders. And that is when, between 1930 and 1932, 3 roundtable conferences were organized in London. The first roundtable conference, and Dr. Ambedkar was invited as a representative of Dalits in India. There were 2 of them invited. Dr. Ambedkar was one and Mr. Srinivasan Garu was another one. They were invited. For the first roundtable conference, Congress had boycotted it. Mahatma Gandhi refused to go. There, Dr. Ambedkar saw the opportunity. For the first time, he had an opportunity to talk about the problems of India at a global level, at a national stage, in a global stage. And he took full advantage of that and made brilliant speeches presenting the sides of the marginalized strata of the Indian society. That, when Mahatma Gandhi came to know about it, Mahatma Gandhi wrote a small letter to Dr. Ambedkar that I want to meet you. So should I come to you or you will come to me? Mahatma Gandhi was 22 years older than Dr. Ambedkar. So Dr. Ambedkar said, I will come to meet you. And then the first historic meeting between the two took place in 1930 in Mani Bhavan in Mumbai. That place is still preserved. That meeting was historic because in that meeting they met and fought with each other in the very first meeting. And they did not agree on anything. You will find the details in many of my books. Those details are there. But that was on the eve of the second roundtable conference. In the second roundtable conference, Congress party had withdrawn the boycott and decided to participate. And that is why Mahatma Gandhi had invited Dr. Ambedkar to listen to his side. So when they went, immediately after that meeting, they left for London and then they met each other, came amne samne, faced each other in the second roundtable conference, and the hell broke loose. You should see the details of the discussion that took place and the way Dr. Ambedkar spoke against Gandhiji and the way Gandhiji spoke against Dr. Ambedkar. The basic issue at that time was, should there be independent electorates, separate electorates for untouchables, or there should be joint electorates with reservation. This was the issue. Dr. Ambedkar was championing the cause of independent electorates, and Mahatma Gandhi was totally opposed to that. So they all agreed, and they gave in writing, as a matter of fact, that the final decision should be taken by the government of British government, and whatever decision is taken, that will be binding on us. Everybody signed on that, excluding Dr. Ambedkar, but including Mahatma Gandhi. And Mahatma Gandhi was absolutely certain that the decision is going to be in his favor. 6 months down the line, the decision came out that is called the communal decision. The communal decision that was given by the British government was 100% in favor of Dr. Ambedkar and 100% against what Mahatma Gandhi had pleaded for. At that time, Mahatma Gandhi was in jail, Yerwada jail in Pune, and he was shocked. Immediately, he announced that from the next day, he was going to go into fast unto death. This was the announcement. And what was his demand? That Dr. Ambedkar should withdraw his demand. Because the verdict went against Mahatma Gandhi, he wanted Dr. Ambedkar to withdraw. And the whole country was turned against Dr. Ambedkar. He was called traitor, and all the adjectives were used. Now this was a big fight between the two, and finally, with a lot of people intervening, finally the settlement was done in 1931. That is called the 1932. That is called the Pune Karar, the Pune Pact. That Dr. Ambedkar finally withdrew the demand for independent electorates in spite of the verdict given in his favor, and in spite of the fact that Mahatma Ji had said in writing that he will accept the verdict, and he accepted joint electorates with the reservation for untouchables or Dalits. This is what happened that was the sixth effort of constitution making. Now, nothing happened for some time after that, but based on the work of the roundtable conferences, Government of India Act of 1935 came into being. Now that was the first big constitution that we really got. Government of India Act of 1935. And that act had two provisions, giving the provincial autonomy, and it had many provisions, but it was a remarkable act which is virtually the earlier British constitution of our country, and it had the provision of creating, can you imagine, a federation of India. United States of India, Federation of United States of India, something like that. There was a provision not only to give provincial autonomy, but also create a federation of all the provinces of the British Empire at that time in India. As far as the provincial elections are concerned, the first ever provincial elections took place in 1937. And that was the time when Dr. Ambedkar formed his first political party, the Independent Labour Party, in 1936. He contested the election and got fairly large number of seats, 15 seats in Maharashtra province, Bombay province at that time he got. And after that, they started the work on this Federation of Indian States. And Dr. Ambedkar came out very strongly against it, and he gave a big speech in Gokhale Institute in Pune, which is published as a memorandum. It was a memorandum explaining this Federation of India will never work, and it will go against the democracy. The Federation was supposed to include both the provinces of British India as well as the princes holding privy purses. They were also supposed to be included. And they said that there would be a good democratic effect of bringing provincial autonomy in British India on the princes, kingdoms of the princes. Dr. Ambedkar showed how exactly opposite was going to happen given the provisions of the Federation at that time. In fact, rather than creating a democracy in the princely states, it would bring in dictatorial elements from the princely states into the working of the British India. So that was the seventh effort. The eighth effort that was made for constitution making was Cripps mission in 1942. The effort of making the Federation of Indian States had to be abandoned because the Second World War broke. Second World War broke in 1939, and that is when all the efforts about creation, provincial autonomy was given, but the attempt, all the provincial governments resigned en masse, so that came to standstill, and the proposal about Federation of United States of India also was lost. After that, nothing happened for 3-4 years, but in 1942, when the war was not going in favor of the Allied forces and the Japanese were round the corner in India, that is when the government of Britain, they were shaken and they decided that something has got to be done. So Churchill, who was the Prime Minister of UK at that time, sent a mission, Cripps mission. This happened in 1942, Cripps mission for constitutional reforms, and Cripps, Mr. Lord Cripps had several meetings with all the political parties, all the interests. Dr. Ambedkar made a presentation there, and he came out with many proposals he gave to the Cripps Commission. But the negotiations between the Cripps Commission and the British government and the Indian leaders, and the Indian leaders failed completely because Cripps Commission had a peculiar mandate. Winston Churchill had given them a draft, and there was no room for negotiation or maneuver. There was no maneuverability. The basic stance of the Cripps Commission was take it or leave it. Chahiye to le lo, nahi to chhod do. And that is what happened. The whole report was kind of abandoned. Dr. Ambedkar made a presentation before the Cripps Commission. He was very unhappy about the way the report was written, and extensive criticism was made by Dr. Ambedkar because he said that there are no communal quotas, and in fact Dr. Ambedkar said something very interesting. He said that just 1 year ago, the British government had said that they would not grant Constituent Assembly. Demand for Constituent Assembly was there, but they had refused. British government had refused. But 1 year later, they said, okay, we will go ahead with the Constituent Assembly. 1 year ago, Dr. Ambedkar said, British government had said that they will not allow Pakistan because that is going to balkanize, that will be balkanization of India. 1 year later, they accepted that too. And here, Dr. Ambedkar points out that the British were so scared of defeat in the Second World War at that time that they were offering more than what was demanded. For example, Muslim League had never demanded separate Pakistan until that stage. Until that stage, what Muslim League had asked was this: at the next revision of the constitution, the Muslims should not be prevented from raising the question of Pakistan. This was the limited demand made. And what did the British do? They went to the extent of saying, Dr. Ambedkar says, they have gone a step beyond and distinctly given Muslim League and them a right to create Pakistan. This was Dr. Ambedkar's criticism, and he said that there are no communal quotas and Cripps proposals. He said that they have nothing, absolutely nothing. They have completely ignored, they don't even mention the word untouchables. They have nothing. In fact, his words were, the mission's proposal offer the scheduled caste, what we call later, the mission proposals offer them nothing, stone instead of bread. This is the comment that was made by Dr. Ambedkar. fortunately, that proposal. And he also said that Cripps Mission's proposals are actually literally throwing the depressed classes to the wolves, in the sense that depressed classes were left completely at the mercy of the majority, without giving them any say in the matter. That was Dr. Ambedkar's contention. Then came the 9th attempt. This was a very interesting attempt. Very little is discussed about that. This was the attempt made under the chairmanship of Sapru, Tej Bahadur Sapru, who was one of the finest lawyer and leader at that time. He wrote a constitution of his own under all-party conference. And this happened in 1945. This was the 9th attempt, but unfortunately, this attempt, although it was very detailed attempt at making Constitution of India, it did not receive any support, even from the Congress party. Muslim League, of course, immediately threw it out, but it did not get any mileage. Dr. Ambedkar had criticized that one too, but he said that under different circumstances, probably this attempt could have worked, but it did not happen. It was not the right thing to do at the right time. This was the 9th attempt. That brings me to 10th attempt at constitution making, and this was the cabinet mission. What happened was, on 15th March 1946, the then Prime Minister Clement Attlee suddenly made an announcement. They acknowledged India's right to achieve full independence. So without any big demand, the struggle was going on, but all of a sudden, Attlee, the then Prime Minister, announced in March 1946, 15th March 1946, that full independence must be given to India. And he sent a mission on 25th March 1946. He sent a mission called Cabinet Mission, because it had 3 of the ministers from the cabinet. And he sent that mission to work out the transfer details. And they decided to, the mission composed of 3 British cabinet ministers. It was very powerful, and that's why it's called the cabinet mission, 3 cabinet ministers. And the mission's objective was to hold discussions with all the political parties from the viewpoint of transferring the power from the British to the Indians. Second, the objective was to set up the Constituent Assembly. And the third one was establishing an executive council, a council of ministers, with the support of main Indian political parties. Now, Dr. Ambedkar, again as usual, went before the cabinet mission, and submitted memoranda. He gave a testimony and issued press notes. Basically, he was demanding that there should be adequate representation, adequate voice given to the underprivileged strata of society, without which we cannot accept that. But they went right ahead. Now, at that time was a very critical time. Dr. Ambedkar, the second time when the provincial elections took place, Dr. Ambedkar's then established political party, that was established in 1942, Scheduled Caste Federation, that did very badly all over the country. So he did not have the political backup. So he started saying, he told the cabinet mission that we don't want Constituent Assembly. And he made a suggestion. He said, all the issues about constitution can be divided into 2 parts. One is the political set of issues, and the second is the legal set of issues. Look at the professionalism of Dr. Ambedkar. Dr. Ambedkar said that as far as the political issues are concerned, that political parties will decide. A separate committee would be there deciding that. But as far as the constitutional content is concerned, It cannot be done by Constituent Assembly because the kind of people who are going to be participating in the Constituent Assembly, they will not be able to handle those technical issues. So he said that there should be a 3-member committee. Maybe we should get some expert from outside, supported by 2 of the Indian experts, but that job has to be done professionally. At that time, he had no idea that he was going to be given the responsibility. But as the miracles happened, what happened was everybody knew that Dr. Ambedkar cannot be in the Constituent Assembly. In fact, Sardar Patel has gone on record saying that we will not let, because of Dr. Ambedkar's fight with Mahatma Gandhi, Sardar Patel had gone on record to say that we will not allow Dr. Ambedkar to come through the main door, we will not allow him to come through the window, and we will not allow him to come even through the shutters. This is the statement made. So Dr. Ambedkar was helpless, but then miracle happened. One of his colleagues who was he miraculously, he got Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar elected to the Constituent Assembly, not from Bombay province, but from Bengal. From Bengal, he was elected to the Constituent Assembly, and that was done by a gentleman called Jogendranath Mandal. Jogendranath Mandal is not to be confused with BP Mandal and Mandal Commission that came later. Jogendranath Mandal was a very interesting person. After the partition, he went to Pakistan and he was made the chairman of the Constituent Assembly of Pakistan. He was also made the first law minister of Pakistan. Later on, he was frustrated and he came back, but that is the later part. He managed to get Dr. Ambedkar through in the Constituent Assembly. And when Dr. Ambedkar was in Constituent Assembly, he had a minority of 1. Now, what happened was, the first meeting, the Constituent Assembly was formed. The first meeting took place on 9th December 1946. First major event was 13th December 1946, when Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru made outstanding speech giving the objectives of the Constitution that they were set out. He made a brilliant speech giving the objectives of Constitution. And then there was supposed to be a debate on that objectives of the Constitution. When that was going on, very interesting thing happened. One of the great leaders of Congress Party, Barrister M.R. Jaikar, he suddenly participated when his turn came to speak. He suddenly said that this is wrong. The timing is wrong. Muslim League has boycotted the Constituent Assembly and we cannot go ahead without Muslim participation. That would be unfair. Now this was something everybody was shocked because this was against the party line, and M.R. Jaikar was saying that you cannot go ahead without taking Muslim League on board in Constituent Assembly. And then surprisingly, truly surprisingly, suddenly Dr. Ambedkar was called upon by the chair, Dr. Rajendra Prasad, to speak. And Dr. Ambedkar knew that that was his opportunity. And he made a brilliant speech. Actually, what he said was nothing very different from what Jaikar was saying. It is just that he put it in such a manner that everybody was very happy and elated. He, in fact, made an impassioned appeal. He said, his words were that, setting slogans and strong words aside, let us bring our opponents in so that they may willingly join us on marching upon that road which, if we walk long enough, must necessarily lead us to unity. Actually, this was something, same thing. So, since this was something similar to what Jaikar was saying, but instead of putting it in the legalistic manner, in fact, his quote is very, very interesting. He said that when we are deciding the destinies of nations, dignities of people, dignities of leaders, dignities of parties ought not to count, or they ought to count for nothing. The destiny of the country ought to count for everything. So India first is what he was saying, and that was something which truly changed the minds of Mahatma Gandhi, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, Sardar Patel, because what he was saying was music to their ears. He was talking about one India, undivided India. He was talking about everybody else taken together. He was talking about keeping the destiny of the nation in mind. Understand this, please. Materially, it was not different from what Jaikar was saying, but it won the hearts of people. Kaka Saheb Gadgir, one of the famous members of the Constituent Assembly, he has written in his autobiography that we were all ready to hoot out Dr. Ambedkar. But before we realized, we all were standing up and thumping the desk, cheering Dr. Ambedkar. Such was the transformation achieved that Mahatma Gandhi, that was one speech which ultimately led to Mahatma Gandhi choosing Dr. Ambedkar to be on the... See what happened during that time, partition took place, the seat from which Dr. Ambedkar was chosen was gone to Pakistan, so there was a problem. So Congress party made Barrister Jaikar resign, and in his place, Congress party supported Dr. Ambedkar, and Dr. Ambedkar came back to the Constituent Assembly, and thereafter Dr. Ambedkar was chosen as the drafting member of the drafting committee of the Constitution, and he was also made the next day chairman of the drafting committee. And then we know the final round starts, and when he was in the Constituent Assembly, I've been told to conclude. I'll take 10 minutes more is okay? 10 minutes more okay? Okay, all right. I'll take exactly 10 minutes more because we have started late. In fact, I was asking my friend whether I should cut it short because I have a speech of 1 hour and 15 minutes. He said, no, you go on. But now I have got a note that because we started late, please try to wind up. So I'll come to the final point. Dr. Ambedkar, as he worked very hard on Constitution. A lot of people have criticized, including Arun Chauri, but I have shown in my books how bogus is their criticism. And Dr. Ambedkar not only drafted the Constitution, every word of that, but every time he was the one who piloted the Constitution. On every provision, he would tell the pros and cons, and then try to reach consensus, arrive at a consensus. Now just imagine, even in a cooperative housing society meeting, on a trivial issue like increasing the salary of liftman, people spent 3 hours discussing that. Here there were 300 most brilliant minds in the country talking about the destiny of India, and to achieve a consensus among them was a Herculean task which only Dr. Ambedkar could do. And that is exactly what, let Arun Chauri say anything now, at that time, T.T. Krishnamachari, who was a member, said that although there were 7 members in the drafting committee, one of them was sick, one of them was abroad, one of them died, who was not replaced, and the whole responsibility came down on one person, and that was Dr. Ambedkar. And the chairman of the Constituent Assembly, these people were there at that time. Arun Chauri was not there. What was said by the chairman, Dr. Rajendra Prasad, was, last 3 years, sitting in this chair, I've been watching the working of this Constituent Assembly, and I can say that nobody could have done the work that has been done and achieved by Dr. Baba Saheb Ambedkar. This is what the chair of the Constituent Assembly has said on record. So what do we care about somebody who time to time come out with some kind of criticism saying that no, Dr. Ambedkar has nothing to do with the Constitution. It is absolutely ungrateful, and that is for non-academic reasons, not really anything to do with the facts. I have written a counter criticism elsewhere that you can see. But the point is that Dr. Ambedkar wrote the Constitution, piloted it, and most interesting thing is when he finished everything, the Constitution was approved on 25th of November 1949. And on the last day, the speech that he has made, I think every Indian must read that speech. That speech must be a compulsory reading for every school and every college. He is giving his vision about future of India. And in that speech, there are too many things to be quoted there from there, but I'm not going to do all that. But I will only give one warning. Many of his warnings have been timeless. It is as if they were written for today. So prophetic they have been. For that you have to read that speech. But the warning that he gave in the speech, I am going to read out. He said, on the 26th January 1950, we are going to enter into a life of contradictions. In politics, we will have equality, and in social and economic life, we will have inequality. In politics, we will be recognizing the principle of one man, one vote, and one vote, one value. In our social and economic life, we shall, by reason of our social and economic structure, continue to deny the principle of one man, one value. How long? How long shall we continue to live this life of contradictions? How long shall we continue to deny equality in our social and economic life? If we continue to deny it for long, we will do so only by putting our political democracy at peril. We must remove this contradiction at the earliest possible moment, or else those who suffer from inequality will blow up the structure of political democracy which this assembly had so laboriously built. Unquote. This is the Indian Constitution that was framed. One final point and I stop. What is the relevance of the Constitution today? 3 American scholars have done a very interesting legal study. They have studied all the constitutions in the world that came out in 225 years. And what they have found? One of their conclusions is that the average life of a constitution is only 17 years. Mind you, only 17 years. And look at our countries around us. All those countries which became independent after the Second World War. Pakistan has had 3 constitutions so far. And there was a period when there was no constitution at all. And look where Pakistan is now. Same thing happened with Nepal. Same thing happened with Sri Lanka. It happened in many other countries as well. And here we know that 75 years our constitution is standing strong, holding 1.44 billion people, 144 crore people are being held together by nothing other than the Constitution of India, which we owe to Dr. Baba Saheb Ambedkar. Well, friends, I want to thank all of you for patiently listening to my thoughts, and I want to thank the organizers for having given me opportunity to come here and share a few thoughts with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for your illuminating lecture. If there is any occasion in future to introduce you to the audience, I would add one more dimension to your CV. You are being a constitution scholar par excellence. One thing that appears to have escaped your attention, because you have completely surveyed what transpired before making of the constitution. Nehru wanted Sir Ivor Jennings to be the chairman of the drafting committee. It was Gandhi who said no. It must be Dr. Ambedkar who must be the chairman of the drafting committee. Somehow in your eloquence and I know, that's why I'm reminding you. I know that because I have read it. That's how it happened, and he became the chairman of the drafting committee. Thank you, sir, once again for your illuminating lecture. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jadhav, for the fascinating insight into the history of the creation of the Constitution. I'm sure we all didn't know the depth of it, so it was a wonderful lesson for all of us as well. I now request Shri Konda Madhava Reddy to honor the dignitaries on the stage with the mementos. Shri Justice Sudarshan Reddy Garu. Shri Gaddam Prasad Kumar Garu. Shri Sudarshan Reddy Garu. Dr. Lakshman Garu. I now invite Dr. Meera Reddy, daughter of Justice Konda Madhava Reddy, for the vote of thanks.
Namaste, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great honor for me, as the daughter of Justice Reddy, to extend my heartfelt vote of thanks this evening. Memorial lectures are not just gatherings or speeches. They are profound opportunities to remember and honor someone who has been truly dear to us. Looking around the audience, I am reminded of many individuals who have been close to my father and family and have been pillars of strength, support, and guidance, especially in the years following his passing. Dr. Jadhav, Your illuminating lecture not only underscored key aspects of our Constitution, but also reflected your deep passion for its principles, reminding us all of the power and significance of this living document. Dr. Lakshman Garu, Gaddam Prasad Garu, both esteemed political advisors to my brother and distinguished politicians in your own right, I sincerely appreciate your presence here today. Sri Justice Sudarshan Reddy Garu, our presiding officer for this evening, this moment allows me, on the behalf of our entire family, to express our deep gratitude for your presence, not just today, but on numerous occasions when we have sought your wise counsel. I extend my sincere thanks to the members of the JKMR Foundation and the governing body of AV College, including Professor Konda Madhava Reddy, Dr. Gautami, and many others for your invaluable contributions to this event and to the foundation. I thank all the judges, retired judges, legal luminaries. I thank Mari Shashidhar Reddy Garu, Kodandaram Garu, our MLAs Vivek Garu, MP Vivek Garu, Rajgopal Reddy Garu, for their presence today. It is only fitting to acknowledge and appreciate all those involved in the various initiatives of the Justice Konda Madhava Reddy Foundation, whose meaningful work continues to impact society while keeping his legacy alive in the most positive way. I hope you continue to grow and expand these efforts. I would like to thank the members of the press for their presence and coverage. A special note of thanks to Rishika, daughter-in-law of Konda Vishweshwar Reddy, for her grace and eloquence as the compeer for this evening. Thank you.
Before we leave, I'd just like to make a small announcement. My acquaintance with Professor Jadhav dates back to 2017, when we spent a week in Chicago. And he has given me a lot of books, some of which I read. But his latest book, Dr. Ambedkar, Who Shaped the Indian Republic, is something that we all should read. And I think it's available in almost all the bookstores. Thank you. Thank you for all of you being here.
Okay, it's gone. Leave it now. Leave it. Leave it. Oh, okay.
अधिनायक जय हे पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड़ उत्कल बंगा विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्चल जलधि तरंगा तव शुभ नामे जागे तव शुभ आशीष मांगे गाहे तव जय गाथा जन गण मंगलदायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता